What's up, guys? Welcome back to Sham. Today's video we're going to be doing a Turkish twist, well, attempting to make a Turkish twist. Once we get to the end of the video, I'll let you decide how well it came out. But we're going to be stacking up our billet, and it's going to be a 16 layer billet, and we're doing one on, one off. That way we have a 1084 and a 15 and 20 stacked interchangeably, and we're going to weld up our billet. Now, if you're a regular viewer, you will be able to notice that this is actually the same billet from the video from last week. And that is because I decided to add this extra bit of the process, because without it, it would be a little weird if I just start off with a billet that's already been pressed, especially for such a build as this one. I'd like to show off all the steps. So we're going to start from the very beginning. So the first few minutes will be the same. You've probably already seen it. And if you haven't, check it out. And if you've already seen it, just watch it again. It's all cool. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press out the billet. It's pretty much a standard thing at this point. And we're going to work it down to about 1 inch by 2 inches. That way I can go on ahead and restack it. Here I have my 1 inch kiss blocks, and in between those 1 inch kiss blocks it's a little bit over 2 inches. So I have a rough estimate of what I want for my length and my width and my height. And I'm taking big bites out of it just to try to make the process go faster. After I draw it all the way out, I straighten it out when my longer dies, and we are good to go for another restack. So from here I will be cutting it and restacking it, and we're gonna have right around 64 layers if my math isn't off. One thing about making Damascus, specifically the one I'm doing, is that there is a lot of waste. Just for the cutting and restacking, I have to cut off all the ends, and then I have to restack them, and once I forge it out I have to cut the ends off again, because the ends tend to get messed up in the process and they're not really even or good looking. So every time I do another stack, I have to cut those off. And specifically for the Turkish twist pattern, you have to remove a lot of material so you can get the inside to show, and that's what gives it that signature look. For this particular build though, I am only going to be restacking once, so it's going to be 64 layers that I'm going to be working with, because for a pattern like this you don't want to really go too high on the layer count. That way the bold colors will pop out and it'll look a little bit better. So here I'm just working it down, and I'm looking for the same thing again, about 1 inch and about 2 inches. And these longer dies that I made, they definitely do come in handy for straightening out on my material. Though in all honesty, I wish I made them a little bit longer. Those are 4 inches, but they are sideways. I wish I had made them 6 inches or maybe even 8 inches, and they would do a slightly better job. Here I'm using the 1 inch kiss block with another 1 inch piece up top, and that way I can get my 2 inches. For some reason I do not recall, while I was forging I decided to go a little bit thinner, so these are 1/2 inch kiss blocks, and I believe it's because I wanted a little bit more length. So after looking around, I found these 1/4 inch pieces and I put them on top. That way we could hit 3/4 in thickness, and that way I could get enough length for everything that I wanted to do, since this was for more than just a Turkish twist knife. Now, thinking back, I should have just made the Turkish twist out of this, but I just haven't learned to be able to put out enough material for whatever knife I want to do. I normally end up making a little bit less than what I need, but hopefully it's something I'll get over eventually. After separating the material I needed for last week's build and this week's build, I started up on forging out this portion to a 1x1. That way I could get enough length to be able to twist it. I believe I wasn't satisfied with the length, so I went on and went a little bit thinner, because here realistically I don't have enough material. So I went back to the 3/4 by 3/4, and I ended up with just under 20 inches of material, which should be enough for this build. And I say should be, but speaking honestly, I didn't know what I was making. All I knew is that I wanted to try out the pattern, so whatever material I had was what was going to dictate what I was going to make so here I'm knocking down the corners, and I'm basically trying to make it circular or round. That way when I do twist it, I have less high spots that can become cold shuts down the line. I still will have minor cold shuts here and there, but they're going to be extremely superficial versus bigger ones that I would have if I did not do this part. Alright guys, so here I have my two pieces of Damascus steel that I made. I rounded them off and I'm gonna twist them. I'm gonna twist one to the right and one to the left, and we're gonna make I'm going for a Turkish twist. Hopefully I have enough afterwards to cut them in half and stack them, and it should work out pretty well. So what I'm planning to do for my twisting is I'm gonna actually do it with a torque wrench, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna weld this nut to it up here. I'm gonna weld it on there, and then once I heat it up, I'm gonna clamp it on the press on this side, and then on this side I'm gonna have the nut on the outside, and I'm gonna just put it into the torque wrench and twist it, and hopefully that works, because if it doesn't, then I wasted $100 on a torque wrench drill thing for nothing. So hopefully this works and it can make this twisting easier, and that way I can do more twist Damascus in the future, you know, a lot easier. So let's give it a try. Hopefully this works. I saw Will Stelter do it in a video not too long ago. I'm pretty sure it was his video, but nonetheless I wanted to give it a try. It seemed like a good idea, and so let's get to it. So a quick PSA for anybody who wants to try this. I did put these guys in muriatic acid to strip the coating on the outside, the zinc coating, and then I welded it. If you're going to try this, be sure to do that, or put it in vinegar for a day or so. That way it strips that coating and you're not getting all those toxic fumes whenever you're welding it, because if you do, definitely don't do that, because it's very, very toxic and very, very bad for you. So here I am doing what I said. I was using the torque wrench drill, whatever it's called, and it did pretty good work. My focusing wasn't quite good on here, but you can see it's definitely twisting it. It's pretty difficult to be able to twist where you want, because the heats are pretty uneven depending on where it's sitting in the forge. So hopefully in the future I can get a propane tank or an oxyacetylene torch, and then I can, you know, heat up the parts that I do want to twist, and I think that would be better. So here I am reflattening it out, trying to re-square it. If you can see at the end, I ended up shearing a little bit, which causes me to have a little bit less material than I had wanted, which ends up being a problem down the line where I keep losing material, but we'll get there when we get there. So here I'm just squaring everything up so that I can grind it and restack it. So originally I was squaring it down with the 3/4, but I noticed that that wasn't enough to get a nice decent square. So then I moved over to the 1/2 inch to square it out, and that worked out better. Alright guys, so I put these in muriatic acid for a while to get rid of all the scale and loosen everything up. So now I'm going to go on ahead and clean the surfaces, and I'm going to forge weld it like this, leave this for the tang, and it's not much material, but hopefully we have enough for a decent sized knife, and I'm hopeful it's going to turn out good. I'm not sure about the patterning right here. I got a little bit of the end in there, but maybe from here forward it's going to be enough. We can chop this off and, you know, use this for the tang and whatnot. We'll see what we end up making. If it looks good, we might just leave it. I'm not sure. But since I have very limited steel, I'm just going to go with what I got, and hopefully it looks good. So I'm going to go on ahead and clean these inside parts, and I'm going to tack it up together. Once the billet got hot enough, I pressed it under the press with the longer dies. Since it's such a tall piece, I figured that was the best option. Alrighty guys, so the initial forge weld seemed to go pretty well. I'm gonna grind off these tack welds that I did on the front and on the back, and I'm gonna go on ahead and grind it, make sure the welds are solid and everything's good. And then we're just gonna take it from there, and we're gonna forge out a knife. I kind of want to make a cleaver, but to get the pattern that I need to grind out a decent amount of steel. So I'm not sure what I'm gonna make yet. I might just make like a bigger butcher's knife. I don't know, I'm not sure. It is a decent amount. It's probably like 4 inches of material, but it's also right around half an inch thick. So I'm not sure. We'll see what I come up with between now and the whole forging process. But for now, I'm gonna go on ahead and grind these off. Actually, I'm gonna put in some muriatic acid just to loosen up all the scale and all this glass that's on there, and then I'll grind it. And hopefully our seams are stuck well together. I'm about to grind off these tack welds. That way we can go on ahead and fully weld this thing and make sure that all this is nicely welded. One thing that is a bit of a bummer is I think I put this bottom one wrong. I think it's not supposed to be going this way, but it's supposed to be going downward. It's supposed to be going downward, not that way. But I'm not sure. But at the same time, I mean, if I get the pattern in the center, I'm pretty happy with that. And since it's already been forge welded and hopefully it's all stuck together properly, there's not really any benefit of me trying to take this off because of that. So I might just get the Turkish twist in the center, and I'm okay with that. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. It's looking pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and grind off these welds and grind here, and then I'll hit it with a abrasive wheel and make sure to clean all these joints up, and hopefully everything's grabbed on well. Alright, so I got it pretty cleaned up. You can see on the sides that it's welded pretty good. Same on the front. The welds look pretty solid. I grounded up all the center of the bottom, and it looks pretty well welded as well. Top, I didn't really want to mess with it too much. I'm sure a lot of these grinds, a lot of these seams are very, very, very superficial. So I don't even want to bother with them too much. So I just got rid of the top ones. And I'm hoping those are either going to weld, or I'm going to end up grinding them off whenever I do the full grind at the end anyways. Because to do a proper Turkish twist, I have been told that you have to remove like literally half of the material. So I'm going to stretch this out to a 1/4 thickness. And it's at 1/2 inch right now. So I'm going to forge it out to a 1/4 thickness. And then from there, I'm just going to do my grinding. And hopefully it comes out nice. And if it doesn't, then oh well. It'll still look interesting. So we're going to go into the forge, get it forge welding hot, and we're going to start cleaning it up and stretching it out. So ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to learn anything from this video, definitely clean out your billets as much as necessary. As you can see on mine, I definitely did not, and I will have minor problems from that in the future. And so I was working with a limited amount of material, and because of that I ended up taking those decisions, which now in the future I noticed I shouldn't have. And one other thing that I learned while doing this build is that I should have left those welds in the front and in the back to be able to hold everything together while I forged it. If those welds were there, this problem that's about to happen right around here would not have happened. And I don't know if you saw it because it went pretty quick, but I had a big old delamination starting to pop up from the center of the front of that piece where I am trying to forge in a tip. And that is because nothing was holding it there, and those edges are always the first ones to go. One thing that might have helped mitigate this is if instead of trying to work it down to a 1/4 thickness and then forging it to shape, I could have done a preform earlier while it was still thicker, and we could have avoided this problem. But I can't say for sure if that would have mitigated the problem or not. That's just what I have off the top of my head at the moment. But for sure, 95%, I believe if I had left those welds there, I would have mitigated that possibility of cracking. And so afterwards I decided not to work on the front anymore, and I moved towards the tang of the knife. And here I had my second problem, which was while I was forging it, I put too much pressure on the tang. Alright guys, so I ran into a little issue. So I must admit I did something off camera, and that was that I ground this tip where it was open that it didn't want to re-weld. And then I threw it back in the forge, and I wanted to shape the tip just a little bit just to curve this edge upward. And in the process of that, as soon as I hit this part, which was hot, and this crack got bigger. And now I'm starting to think that this top one didn't weld to these other three. And I figured this might happen, but I was kind of hopeful it wouldn't. But since I have this extra piece, every time I'm holding it, it's always going to be having some kind of pressure added to it. And because of all that pressure, it was opening at the seam. Now, one thing I shouldn't have done, now that I think about it, I shouldn't have ground out these welds here and here. If I had left those welds, they would have actually held the knife together, and then I could have just ground them out at the end once everything was forged. So yeah, that was a biggie on my part, but you know, it happens. So now I'm not sure what part of this knife is actually welded. I'm pretty sure these three are welded, the majority. This guy, I'm not sure if it goes any farther than this, you know, up to here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my diamond disc, and I'm gonna grind off all this stuff, and then I'm gonna cut wherever this guy gets solid, and then I'm gonna forge this into a tang. And then we're just gonna run it like that. It's gonna be a smaller knife, but as long as we get the pattern, I'm gonna be happy, and I'll call it successful. But yeah, trial and error, I guess. So in the end, I ended up grinding it as clean as I could on the 2x72 before I made up any decisions whether I was going to keep forging on it or not. And it looked pretty good. Alright guys, so I've grounded pretty clean, and that's pretty much where that line really stops being an ugly line, and it gets to a fine line. I do have lines throughout. I'm not sure which ones are cracks and which ones are ghost lines, but I can pretty much guess that right there is where that kind of just really detaches. So I'm just going to cut it there and remove this part, and then I'm going to forge the rest into a knife. I'm going to forge this part into a tang, and I'm going to hope for the best. But I mean, at this point, I'd rather just, you know, 100 or nothing. So we're going to go on ahead and risk it. And if not, then I just lost a whole bunch of material, and you guys get an incomplete video because I'm not tossing it. So it is what it is. It's part of learning. So the notch that you see here, I notched on the 2x72, and I did that specifically for no reason. It just seemed like a quicker option versus trying to cut it with a grinder or a bandsaw. So here I started forging on the tang, hoping I could draw out the tang and have a little bit to work with, and I run into the same problem again where it starts cracking from where it's bent from the fact that my material at this point, if I'm not mistaken, is about 3/16 thick. So it's just not holding up well to forging. So I give up on that side, and I move over towards the tip. Now that I've ground off the material on the tip that was cracked, it definitely forged a lot better, and it did pretty good on holding its own during that forging process. Though I must admit I did not forge too much on it because I was afraid it was going to bend and crack. So I just gave it a little bit of a curve, that way the pattern would follow up on the knife. So now I reach a very delicate part of the build, which is trying to figure out what I can make with what I got. I first started with an 8-inch blade, about 13-14 inches in total, and I ended up with a Deba style knife, which is a Japanese knife, and they're right around 5, 6, 7 inches, which is right where I'm at with this blade length. And I felt it looked good on what I had as a canvas to work with, so that is what we went with. Fortunately, the knife was pretty much to shape. I only had to gone ahead and cut off the pieces in the handle portion of it where I couldn't forge it out anymore, and that went pretty quick with my bandsaw, but the blade was on its last leg, so I ended up having to grind out the tip, which wasn't a big issue. I had a pretty good belt on the 2x72, so it went rather quickly, and I was able to shape the knife pretty quickly as well with this blade. After I shaped it up roughly to where I wanted, I just cleaned it up all the way and got it ready for our heat treat. One thing about this knife, I am pretty happy with the shape, and I think I ended up making a really good knife. The pattern was what I worried about the most, since that was pretty much the most important part of this build, was trying to get the pattern right, which towards the end of the video you'll see how it came out. But overall, I did learn a lot during this build, so I'm not really mad that it didn't come out perfect how I wanted it to. Alright guys, so I'm done with the rough grinding. As you can see the ghost lines, and we got a little bit of something right there, and on this side a little bit of something right there, and possibly a little bit of something right here. But other than that, it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty confident and hoping it won't crack. I was really hoping this area up here on both sides would be pretty clean, and they are, because they're gonna stay roughly that thickness, and my grind's gonna come up like this. So I'm really happy that that part is clear. The rest of it, it's gonna be ground anyways, and we can see those ghost lines. So I'm gonna go on ahead and heat treat it at this thickness, and then I'll do my final grind. I'm probably just under an eighth or right at an eighth. So it's looking promising that it'll come out pretty decent. It is significantly smaller. It's about 6 1/4 blade length, and before it was over 8 inches. And my tang's a little on the small side. I might be doing some welding onto it afterwards if I feel like it's not enough. Essentially, you're gonna be holding the knife like this whenever you use it, so I'm not too worried about it. But if I feel like it's not enough, I can always weld a little bit extra steel onto it. And yeah, other than that, it's going on pretty well, I guess, considering what we started with or what we had not too long ago. It's definitely, you know, more manageable. I'm gonna go on ahead and cycle it, and then I'm gonna go on ahead and heat treat it. Alright guys, so I'm out of my first cycle, my first tempering cycle or normalizing cycle, whatever it's called. And you can see that Damascus is starting to pop out through the grain. Now on this section right here, I didn't have that tight of a grain, but over here I did have a tighter grain. You can see those little X's starting to pop out in certain areas. So that's pretty cool. Hopefully whenever I do my grind, my final grind, a little bit more movement and patterning comes out. If not, oh well, it's still a cool looking knife. But I mean, after all the struggling I've had, I'd just be happy to have a full functioning knife after this. Looks pretty cool. After 2 normalizing cycles, we went for the quench, and fortunately no dings or cracks. Alright guys, so we are out at the temper. You can see the pattern in there. It looks very nice. The knife is pretty much completely straight. Got a little bit of warping towards the tip, but we got so much material to take off. It's pretty much basically nothing. So we're just gonna go with that, and we're going ahead and get our finished grind, and hopefully the pattern pops out in that final grind. And if it doesn't, then it is what it is. It's still going to be a pretty cool multi-bar knife regardless of the outcome, but if it does come out the way it's supposed to, then that'll make me a happy camper. So begins the final grind. I'm using my 4-inch wheel, 6-inch wheel, I don't even know the number it, but I used it to be able to rough up the choil part of the knife and right above the heel, because that section won't be grounded whenever I grind in my bevels. That way it's already up to 220, and whenever I do my hand sanding, I can just hand sand off of there already at 220. Afterwards, I do in my bevels and I round off the spine of the knife. This is a very important part and something I do on every one of my knives, just because it makes it more comfortable and helps with the overall feeling of the knife. And I also hit the heel portion as well, but I do that when I hand sand. That way I don't have any sharp edges that can scratch on my fingers whenever I'm holding it, or just make it uncomfortable for long-term use. Alright guys, so I got the knife up to 220. I still have to hand sand it, but we're going to stop there for the now. I'm going to start prepping up my handle. So for my handle, I'm going to be using this piece I found. Stabilized blue, probably like poplar or something. I don't remember. But I have this chunk and I have this guy, and I'm going to put a piece of something in the middle, some kind of black micarta or I don't know, something. I'm gonna look for something to put in there. I still haven't picked that out yet, but I'm gonna cut this piece and we're gonna get them to fit together. Gonna drill our hole in here. We're gonna make it happen to the best of my current ability, and I think these two are gonna match together. Really bold bolster area and then more like a neutral color. I think it's gonna work well. So here the bandsaw gives in and just dulls out completely, and that is because it was the bandsaw that comes with the machine, and those tend to be crappy. So after I switched it out for a new one, it cut like a beauty, cut like butter, and I had no issues with it moving forward. But that first original cut did cut at a little bit of an angle. After I squared everything out, I started doing my handles. I am doing the back part first, and I'm digging it a decent bit through, and then after I connect everything, I go on ahead and do the front portion. And the reason why I do that is because it just makes it easier, and I'm drilling through less. I don't want to drill the front ones first, because if I do that, they could kind of pull the other ones out the way, because it'll grab it as a guide and they kind of push it around. So I ended up doing those first. And the reason why I did the big hole and then I moved back to the blue piece is because I had to switch drill bits and I didn't feel like switching them. So I ended up doing the first part, then switching back and forth. That's why it's like that on the video. After a little bit of hand filing, it fit like a glove. So here I'm gonna do something called bedding in the tang. And first, before I do that, I'm gluing up a piece of black paper micarta, I believe it was, and I'm just gluing it up there because it's easier to have less moving parts when I actually do my glue up. And I'm using some super glue, and it works pretty good. And I ended up getting a little bit of my glove stuck on there, but I ended up sanding it off. Here I am using some paste wax, and that's just gonna help for the knife to be able to pull out after it dries up enough, and it will leave the shape of the tang in the handle and make it just easier to be able to hold it in one place. So the reason why I only put that one piece on and not the whole thing was so I had a big enough hole that I could pour the material in, because epoxy is a pain to pour, and I'm using 5-minute epoxy, so it is definitely a pain to pour in, and something I have to do very quickly. And afterwards I just hold the two pieces together, make sure I get rid of any excess epoxy, and I just hold it together with my hands until it dries up. It probably had 2 or 3 minutes before it started tacking up, and as you can see here, it just breaks the popsicle stick whenever I try to move it. So that means the epoxy on the inside is dry and I can pull out my knife. Afterwards I go on ahead and hand sand the knife, and I leave the epoxy to cure a little bit more. Alright guys, so I have the knife already hand sanded. We're going to move to the handle. I got some lines scribed. That way I can make sure everything's nice and even with the tang. It is a little bit skewed to one side, but I mean, we can live with that. So we're going to go on ahead and grind to those lines, and then we'll go on ahead and grind to the other lines after I clean it up and I mark those as well. Should be a pretty good size handle. So for anybody that's new, and I know when I was new, I didn't really know what to base these numbers off of, and after a few years of doing this, I've come to the conclusion that I can base them off of whatever I want. So I ended up making the front portion of my knife 1/2 inch wide, and the back portion 1.25 inches, or about 1 inch. I think it was 1 1/8 inches. And from there I just spaced everything out, drew some lines, and went on ahead and started carving out my handle. Afterwards I do the same thing to the other side, and I space it out evenly. Here are those lines, and towards the end I decide to knock off the corners, and I also do that pretty much just based off of feeling. There really is no right way to do this. I just kind of go with whatever comes to mind at the moment. Truth be told, this handle was slightly thicker than what I would like, but overall it was a very comfortable handle. And if I were to do it again, I'd make it just slightly thinner because it is a chunky boy. Now moving on to our etching process, I put it in the ferric chloride, and then we move off to the coffee to let it sit in there for about 3 or 4 hours and let it darken up real nice and good. So here's a portion of the video I'd like to ask you guys. If you watched this far, obviously you'll enjoy this video and you enjoy this type of content. So if you'd like to do me the favor of subscribing if you're not subscribed, because about 90% of you guys that are watching are not subscribed, I would really appreciate that. And if you would like to help support the channel in a monetary fashion, you can go to my online store and I have a whole bunch of knives there that you can buy, and I will be stocking more up as soon as I have more done to sell for you guys. They have been selling pretty good over the last about 3 months. I really started putting knives up for sale, and I'm very grateful for anybody who has bought any, because honestly, it's a really nice feeling when people are buying your stuff and you have repeat customers. You're like, wow, my stuff ain't crap, because people come back to get some more. So here is the final look at the knife. It looks very nice. I love the handle. I think I did myself with the handle. I don't normally do handles these knives. And the pattern came out pretty good. The pattern on the edges where it was tighter definitely came out a lot nicer than the pattern on the center, but overall it came out really nice. But as always, I really appreciate you guys watching, and I will catch y'all on the next one. Peace.